Hello, everyone. It's Gordon Causey coming to you live and unscripted on Sunday, the 2nd of June, 2024. And someone who's supposed to be in bed is not. I hear him getting a bottle of water. Maybe one day I'll introduce you to him, but not tonight. And Candy didn't jump up on me, which is weird. She's right here. I even took my coffee and put it aside because I didn't want to be holding it and have her actually spill the coffee on myself one night. Because I had my coffee here and bang, she came up and knocked it flying. All right. Yes, I do have one. You weren't expecting it. Shake, Paul. Shake, shake, shake. Lay down. Speak. All right, come up. There you go. Seems she wasn't expecting a treat. Anyway, thanks for watching. Again, it is June 2nd, Sunday night, 2024. It's 11:32 p.m. now. I got this. I started on time. I posted that I'd be doing this at 11:30, and I made it. No one is watching right now, and maybe no one will. We'll see. As I often say, my miserable and pathetic YouTube station with no, or YouTube channel with no production values, just me sitting at a dining table. Nothing special. Anyway, I wanted to talk about, I have a long-time contributor to this channel, someone who goes by the name of Sojournerdidimus. I think his name is Thomas. He's in the Netherlands, so Dutch. Dutch or Friese, but I think he is Dutch. Netherlands, there are two populations, principal populations, the Dutch and the Friese. So that's neither here nor there. He introduced a term to me that I wasn't familiar with, and the term is prebunking. I imagine that most of us have heard the term debunking, as in we'll hear often that has been debunked. And that's all people want to know. People genuinely just want to get to the end. They want a shortcut. They don't want to do any reading, any investigation. They just want the answer spoon-fed to them. And even if it's even if what they're being spoon-fed is false, as long as it comes from an authoritative source, they're happy, because then they fool themselves into thinking, all right, I have been informed. I now see I have two people watching. As always, live chat is on. So Sojournerdidimus introduced me to this term prebunking, and I did some reading up on it. I've linked down below an article that goes deeply into it, and it's authored by Cambridge University, which is one of the top schools in the world, one of England's top universities, as well as the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, which is the government broadcasting agency in the United Kingdom, in Great Britain. And the third entity is Google, a division of Google, and I forget the name of it. Gotta look it up. I've got the article up here. What was the name of that third? Jigsaw, which is a division of Google. So you have academia, you have media, and you have the corporate sector, all coming together, talking about how to pre-bunk. And I've done some other reading on it as well. It's basically an effort by those who want to push an agenda to get out in front of what they foresee as possible objections to it. And I don't think actually this is anything new. I think we've been dealing with this for a long time. Certainly during the entire COVID era, we were dealing with pre-bunking. And it would be so annoying for an individual such as myself to bring up perfectly, verifiable facts, such as the fact that the SARS-CoV-2 so-called vaccines, that they're rushed through development, that they didn't do the study on them that would normally be done, separate phase 1, separate phase 2, separate phase 3 trials. And I was aware of the fact that at the time on Facebook, there was a company called Digital Public Square, and they put out a coronavirus quiz that they received funding. This company, Digital Public Square, had received funding from the government of Canada, and I imagine other government agencies, other countries as well. And they put their quiz up on social media platforms like Facebook and would invite people to play the coronavirus game, a game, ooh. And it was so chock full of misinformation, disinformation, and outright lies suggested or presented as fact. One of those facts, they said that SARS-CoV-2 originated in a lab. And if you swipe true, it would say incorrect. It has been proven that SARS-CoV-2 originated in nature. Weird, because it's now been widely acknowledged, finally, that the most likely origin for SARS-CoV-2 was, in fact, from a lab, which was put out there by the director of the CDC, a gentleman by the name of Dr. James Redfield. It was also, this idea was put out there by a Nobel Prize winning virologist from France by the name of Dr. Luc Montagnier. He and his lab, they were the first to identify and isolate HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. He won a Nobel Prize for that discovery. And his opinion was garbage, and in the eyes of a lot of the unthinking public. And I would submit that it was because of this prebunking that they had gone out and debunked the truth and gotten people to exchange lies for the truth. And people like to think they're informed. They like to think they're smart. So you go onto Facebook, you take a simple little quiz, and if you give false answers, you're rewarded by, oh, you've leveled up. You're now a pro. You're now an expert. You're now a commander. They had all these, little levels. I mean, it's very juvenile, but it gives that little endorphin, dopamine, whatever that little chemical drug in the brain that makes you feel happy. Yay, I got it right. It's like when you're in grade school, you get the gold star, and you get a sad, depressing face when you get one wrong. Oops, you got that one wrong, but you can go back and do it again. And if you answer right, we'll give you the gold star. And then ask you, how willing would you be to share this test with others? And if you slide to the left, the face goes all sad, and if you slide to the right, the face goes all happy. I mean, it's almost like that ad that they had. I forget who the gentleman was, but he's a governor for a U.S. state, eating his burger and fries, saying, if you get the vaccine, you get this burger, you get these fries. There's a fry component to this too. Ooh, aren't you? And it just, this is what we're up against in combating the truth. And it got me. Early on in 2020. There was an article published to Nature magazine, which is a highly respected, well-known science-based publication. And they had produced an article talking about the origins of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and explaining how it had jumped from a bat population, which we now know is completely false and unproven. Jason King says, happy Sunday. Happy Sunday to you too, Jason. Thanks for saying hi. How the SARS-CoV-2 virus jumped from a bat population to the human population. And I read the article. I read the full article. And this is early. This was published back in maybe February, March, April. before things had really gone insane. And they got bad enough in March, but they hadn't gone, we weren't forcing people to wear diapers on their faces or to take an improperly tested vaccine yet. And so I read this article and I believed it. And what the article said is that coronaviruses exist in bat populations. That I'm willing to accept. I'm willing to acknowledge that. Okay. Coronaviruses exist in bat populations. And they said that in wet markets like what they have in Wuhan, China, where the bats are caged in very confined cages and such, they're under stress. And because they're under stress, the virus starts to express itself. And the example they gave, one which I know very well because I experience it myself, haven't for a long time, but especially as a kid, cold sores. And those individuals who get cold sores, often it will happen during times where you're under stress. And so that is an expression of this virus. And they said this is what happened with bats being in these confined little cages, being handled by humans, that their coronaviruses express themselves, and then a scratch or a bite with a human will cause that bat virus to jump to the human population. And then bingo presto, we have SARS-CoV-2. And the article, that's a very narrow 100-mile up synopsis on what the article said, but I believed it 100%. They used a great example, one I could relate to, because right up at, it still happens on occasion, but not so much. I deal with stress much better now than I did when I was younger. And I would break out in cold sores, and it was annoying because my mother was a registered nurse, and she knew that I called them facial ulcers. When I was worried, concerned about something, I would get cold sores. My mother would come up to me and say, "What's bothering you, Gordon? What's going on?" And being a typical, 12, 13, 14-year-old teenager, I go, "Oh, nothing." And, "Oh, you can't lie to me." I had a tell on my face, the cold sores, they told her. So using that example, at least for me personally, made perfect sense. Okay, I've got this virus and it expresses itself when I'm under stress. These bats have coronaviruses and they express themselves when they're under stress in these cages, and then it jumped from one to the other. The thing is, this particular version, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, they tested bat populations in Wuhan, China, all over China, all around the world, and they never found a single example of it. And then they started to suggest, well, okay, it didn't come from bats. Maybe it came from raccoon dogs. Fiction. Jason King is writing, Alberta Premier at the time offered $100 to get the jab, jail him. That would have been, I imagine, Jason Kenney. It's insane what was going on. But I want to stick to the subject at hand, which is this pre-bunking. And I now am forcing myself to play a bit of catch up because there's so much news going on right now about bird flu. And I've been doing a little bit of reading on that. I found out that the way that they're testing for bird flu in avian populations like chickens is they are using, are you ready? They're using the PCR test. And based on PCR testing, if they come across a bird, a single chicken infected with bird flu based on a positive PCR test, they're then euthanizing millions of chickens. It's happened just recently in the state of Iowa. Millions of chickens are being euthanized based on, might just be one bird testing positive using this crappy PCR test, which isn't crappy in the sense that if it's used properly, the inventor of this PCR test, polymer chain reaction test, said that his test was not to be used as a diagnostic tool in of itself. It's not to be the sole basis for as a diagnostic tool. it can be used in tandem with blood testing, with, someone expressing symptoms. Someone comes into the hospital expressing symptoms and you can't quite nail it down. You can do serology testing, you can do blood testing, and you can add in a PCR test as part of the diagnosis, but not solely. And what did we do during SARS-CoV-2? Everything was based just on the crappy PCR test. Go and get your nasal colonoscopy. We'll run the cycle threshold up to 40, 45, and get lots of positives and scare the crap out of the population. I have Mish Christie saying bird flu, fear mongering and trying to destroy the food supply, two birds with one stone. And that has occurred to me as well. Chicken is a major food source. And now they have it, of course, infecting cattle. And now they're likewise euthanizing, killing cattle herds because it has jumped, they say. And that's the thing. Nowadays, I'm trying to become much more circumspect. Just because I read something does not mean it is true. For all we know, this so-called bird flu likewise may have originated in a lab. I have my own personal view as to the origin story for SARS-CoV-2. I think they engineered a mostly weak, pardon the expression, but I'm going to swear a little bit. They engineered a mostly weak-ass little virus, SARS-CoV-2, and they made it highly transmissible. That would easily transmit between humans. However, any younger, healthy person, it would cause either very mild illness or no illness at all. The only people for whom it might genuinely cause a problem is if you're 80 plus years of age, living in a nursing home, and already suffering from multiple serious health conditions, and with a year or two to live at most. If it gets into that incredibly weak population, well then it's a problem. And they did a great job of convincing the population that SARS-CoV-2, that nobody's immune system could handle this. It's the novel coronavirus. Your immune system doesn't know what to do with this. Bull, roar. Young people recovered. Even a 50 plus year old guy like myself, when I got it 2 years ago, February of 2022, a 2-day nothing burger, if it in fact was SARS-CoV-2. I could have been infected with anything. Could have been I don't think it was gastro, but it could have been any number of things. But I had classic flu symptoms, shakes, dry, non-productive cough, headaches. That can be any number of things. And like I say, a two-day period, and it was gone. The only thing that leads me to suspect, at the time, there was reporting in February, March of 2022, they were reporting that pink eye or conjunctivitis was a common rebound after a COVID infection. And then sure enough, right after this 2-day nothing burger little bug that I had, 2 days later, I got, within days, and I'm not saying two, might have been a day, 2, 3, whatever. I got conjunctivitis, hit one eye. Then after it cleared up in that eye, it went to the other eye, and then it went back to the original eye, and then it was over. So, was I infected with SARS-CoV-2? Did I have COVID? I'm pretty sure I did. Big deal. But this idea of prebunking, and basically, if you read those articles, what they're talking about is the architects of these propaganda campaigns anticipate the objections that people are going to have, and then they get out in front of them. And one way is through games, like what I was talking about with this digital public square. Have a game for people to play, interactive. You'll get the double-digit IQ types to buy into that crap. Then there's, just in the media, putting out stories like that Nature magazine story ahead of time, so that the origin story can take, can be cemented into the conscious minds of the population, and so that anyone coming along later, is thought to be a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, and it strikes me they do this not just with SARS-CoV-2, they do it with climate change. They do it, and they basically have programmed a large percentage of the population to believe that smart people believe in climate change, anthropogenic, so-called man-made climate change. Smart people believe it, dumb people don't. 90, what do they come out with that? 97 or 99% of meteorologists, climate experts agree that human activity is the cause behind climate change. And from everything I've read, climate change, when it comes to experts in that field, meteorology and other things, that yes, it's pretty much universally agreed that human beings have some impact on the climate, but many believe that it's negligible at best, just a drop in the bucket, a drop in the ocean. The degree to which human beings affect climate change, very small, but they get included with the 97 or 99% because they're saying, okay, so you do agree that human activity affects the climate. Well, yeah, a teeny tiny bit. Great, you're in agreement. You're part of the 97, 99% that say human activity is impacting climate change. And so it oversells the narrative. I got Kevin MN saying something weird, that I must be a preacher or a professional public speaker. Far from it. Far from it. Miss Christie, 99% of experts who are not censored. There's a great interview that Jordan Peterson does with a climatologist whose name escapes me, but you can look it up easy enough. And the guy used to be head of climate studies at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the top schools, post-secondary institutions in the world. Before coming to MIT, he was at Harvard, and before Harvard, he was at the University of Chicago. And in each case, he was invited. Harvard stole him from the University of Chicago, and then MIT, in a fashion, stole him from Harvard. The point is, follow the money. Follow the money. In terms of the NIH, National Institutes of Health in the United States, which Fauci used to be the head of, they hand out, it has to be billions of dollars in grant money to research facilities. And so God help you if you're not playing the game, and if you're not promoting the science that they want promoted, you're not going to get your lab, your institution, your research is not going to get government funding. And if you don't get government funding, good luck. Good luck trying to, have a career as a research scientist, regardless of the field. And it's the same thing with this IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change. Anyone who has a research facility that isn't proving that human activity causes significant changes to climate, if your research doesn't show that, you're not going to get a dime from the IPCC. They're only going to give it to those who promote it. But where do we see this prebunking, debunking going on? It's also in this area of gender. This idea that gender is just a societal construct that is presented as fact. They take a total lie that gender is a societal construct, present that as a fact, and unless you get a Matt Walsh type guy or a Jordan Peterson or someone else willing to challenge it, I mean, and in most cases, you turn on one of these shows like The View with these moron women who sit there and, just spit out whatever they're programmed to say and what they want everyone else programmed to, think, believe, and they're even telling people how to feel about things. And so what you get is, I don't like to use the term sheep. It's overused. We basically become automatrons, just a bunch of, we're the Borg. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. And the difficulty is, the way to combat it, as I see it, is to talk about it. I was having a conversation this evening with a young lad I work with about how Fauci, when that his email, he went up before Senate committee hearings in the U.S., and they have publicized many of his emails, and he was praising the article of that, praising the author of that article published in Nature magazine about the phony origin story about SARS-CoV-2 originating in a bat. And why was he praising it? Because the NIH itself has been proven to have been funneling money to that lab in Wuhan, China, that was working on directed evolution or gain of function with bat viruses to make them more transmissible in humans. And he was somewhat taken aback. But at the same time, I don't know what's going on in the inner recess. I don't know what his brain is thinking. I'm contradicting the programming he has been given. And this is why we're so up against it in today's world, because the resources of the WEF to promote gender is just a societal construct. Human activity is destroying the planet. Another pathogenic disease is poised to wreak havoc with the world's human population. They have so many tools at their disposal to sell this fiction that it's worse than David and Goliath in trying to combat against it. The only thing we can look at and the only thing that we can do is we got to work double time to show people. There's just an article today in the Washington Post, which is a mainstream left-wing publication, admitting that there was never any science behind the 6 feet social distancing garbage that kept schools closed and small businesses closed. Everything they did at the beginning of the SARS-CoV-2 supposed the bogus pandemic was based on lies. We've got to keep everyone 6 feet apart. So we have to close the schools and we have to close small business. We have to hammer the weak and the most vulnerable members of our society, kids and small businesses. But we're going to make the Home Depots and we're going to make the grocery stores, the Weston family in Canada, we're going to make the rich richer, and we're going to hammer the poor and the vulnerable. And they were able to do it because people were scared to death, because the other lie was that SARS-CoV-2 was 10 times more deadly than seasonal flu, which was another lie. Sheriff of YouTube says, I promised my mom I wouldn't become a protester back in 2019. I don't protest nothing in the streets for nobody. To be entirely honest, I'm not a big one on protests myself. I'm not a big fan of the mob. Even when I agree with the mob, I remember early on the protests that were taking place against the lockdown measures, and they showed some idiot kid with a sign that said, I want a haircut. That kid was probably planted there to make anyone protesting, and this is more of the prebunking, debunking, by having an individual do that and wear, with that stupid sign, I want a haircut, helps to delegitimize the genuine voices, the voices that were speaking out against lockdowns and the damage they were doing, and the genuine, significant, real world, who cares about your hair? What about we're forcing abused children to shelter in place with their abusers, and you've declared alcohol in the beer store and the liquor store they're essential? You won't let that guy open up his barber shop, or the lady open up her hair salon, but you're letting Home Depot be open. The insanity of it all was crazy. But I wanted to bring this pre-bunking, debunking, because everyone should be taking a very sideways look at anything put out by the mainstream media, especially anything that has the potential to impact public policy, anything. So certainly bird flu, certainly anything with gender, certainly anything with anything that touches on public health. All these things, the tools that groups like the WEF have at their disposal to warp the minds of Canadians, Americans, Western Europeans, anyone in the developed world, we are really up against it. And getting back to Kevin M.N. point, I'd like to be a preacher. I consider myself something of a preacher. I do like to share the gospel good news of Jesus Christ, because at the end of the day, the author, the one pulling the strings on this agenda, ultimately at the highest level, is Satan. This is a satanic agenda that it's a beast. It's a multi-headed beast that we are confronting against. And you better be on side with the creator of all things and get to know his son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And that's as much as I can say on it right now. I'm going to do a video in a night or two talking about, what does it mean to be a Christian? All kinds of people say I'm a Christian, but what does it mean? But that's for my next video. I'm going to end this one now because it's already 12:03 in the morning where I am. But I'll thank you as always, thank you for the likes, those I've already gotten and any I will get. And thank you to the 920 odd people who have subscribed. And I'll invite anyone else, if you want to subscribe to this channel, hit the bell. I think that's the term. I think that's the icon. Hit the bell. And we'll see you again in a few nights. Between now and that other video, I have another joke that I'm going to be sharing. So anyway, Jason, Kevin M.N., Miss Christie, Sheriff of YouTube, to those of you who chimed in, thank you. For everyone who watched, thank you. And we'll talk to y'all later. Right now.